registered lobbyists, and at any given time, you have about over 80 clients, 80 plus clients. And at any given time, of course, you can expect any of them to have interests that conflict with other clients. And so what that looks like is being able to delegate to one of the other 10 lobbyists in the firm and being able to tell them like, hey, this is what my client needs. Can you go in on my behalf? Because I've got clients that conflict with their interests. I think that's kind of in the weeds, but I think a pretty good summary.
Awesome, thank you. Hi everyone, good morning. My name is Abby Alvarez. I use she, her pronouns. I am a policy consultant and lobbyist with Everyday Impact Consulting. Everyday Impact is a small social impact firm, so we exclusively represent progressive, community-based organizations. Like Alchemy, I'm also a contract lobbyist. So just to make the distinction really clear, contract lobbyists are client-based, so we're housed at a firm typically, or there are individual contract lobbyists as well. And we have a bunch of different organizations that we lobby for, versus an in-house lobbyist is someone who is housed in one organization and they exclusively represent that organization. So they would be a full-time employee like at Planned Parenthood or Facebook. They have in-house lobbyists who only represent them, and they do it typically full-time. So a little bit about me. I graduated from Santa Clara University in the Bay. I grew up in Oregon. I started in advocacy work really young. I actually started as a youth activist in high school, doing teen suicide prevention, and then I did labor organizing in college. Was introduced into state politics through an internship and then fellowship with the California Immigrant Policy Center. So I know a little bit about in-house lobbying just from seeing that happen while I was there. But yeah, super excited to be here and answer any questions you have.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Quentin Levesque. Thank you, Jody, for the opportunity to be here. I really appreciate it. So I'll start from the beginning for myself and then kind of work my way chronologically. So as a student, much like you guys, my degree was environmental science. And so I was really interested in advocating for the environment. I had a passion for advocating for the environment at the time. And so I was seeking an internship so that I could graduate, and I really had no luck, honestly, as a science major. So what I did was I sought out personal connections. I went to a city council meeting and I met a lawyer in the area who was also a contract lobbyist at the time. And through a personal relationship and through a personal connection, I was able to establish an internship with this law firm as a legislative intern because I was interested in advocating at the state level. And through that experience, I was afforded the opportunity to come on board as a support lobbyist. And in that time, I registered as a lobbyist. I took the ethics course, and my role was really just to support him. And so, as a contract lobbyist at that time, I was tracking bills. I was drafting letters for him. I was organizing lobby days, which is days where your whole organization and their members come in, and you guys have a white sheet and you discuss your issues with members and their staff, and you try to inform them as much as possible. I was also doing things like FPPC compliance, so your quarterly reports, your 635, 625, 615s, super boring stuff, but I was managing those as well. And then after that, I started my own small lobbying practice, which was All-American Advocacy. And in my time, I have only specialized in environmental issue areas. So I was working on clean energy related to conventional natural gas, renewable natural gas, and getting heavy-duty, low-NOx trucks onto the road to reduce greenhouse gas emissions, which was directly related to my education. And then we're also working on issues related to bioenergy. And so we're working on the energy portfolio and allocating more bioenergy to the state's portfolio, if you will. And some other small definition changes at that time. And most recently, I was working on health issues with my client at the All-American Advocacy, which was really outside of my issue area expertise. I wasn't very familiar with health, but they wanted to work with me, and so they gave me, an opportunity to learn their issues, which was a big learning curve, but we made it happen, and we actually introduced a bill. So part of being a lobbyist is also, running bills. SB 625, which died this year, unfortunately, was about the California Newborn Screening Program. So if you're interested in that, you guys can look into it, but it did die in the Appropriations Committee, unfortunately, which is just the process of, the legislation, right? Bills are born and bills are also died. But yeah, I think that's kind of a good sum. I actually have transitioned most recently. I'm not a registered lobbyist. I still advocate when I can for issues that I care about, but I'm actually a teacher now at a high school, and I teach environmental science. And I try to incorporate policy as much as possible, because there's a common misconception that, you know, the lawmaking process and policies is only for political science or government majors or people who are interested in that. But as you're all aware, laws affect everybody, regardless of how old you are or how young you are or what industry you work in. They affect all of us. So it's very much cross-subject and cross-curricular for me, and I try to incorporate that as much as I can in my conversations and my teaching role. Thank you.
I think to follow up on something that you said at the very end there, what is a common misconception that people have about your profession? And also, does it feel better sitting on this side of the table as opposed to in the hot seat?
Yeah, so I think a really common misconception, or at least what I thought a lobbyist was before I got into this space, was that there are only these kind of like dark, shadowy figures with a briefcase who are using money to convince people to vote a certain way. And I can't speak to the federal level and what's happening there, but at least at the state level, there's really, really strict restrictions on lobbyists, and so we're actually not allowed to gift or give any sort of money to elected officials and their staff over $10. So we can't use money. Actually, that's a misconception. And yeah, I always just thought that they were going to be for more like big business, you know, big tech, those types of industries, which absolutely do have tons of lobbying power. But actually, pretty much every issue you can imagine has a lobbyist. I represent community-based organizations, nonprofits that often have contract lobbyists, really progressive organizations to really conservative organizations. So everyone needs lobbyists. You know, I do have that background as an activist, and so I know when I was coming into the political space, I was really skeptical of the whole institution, and I, you know, wanted to stay out of it originally. But I think what I learned with time is that the other side is always going to have people in, and so it's important that there's people in for the causes that you care about too, and in the system making the arguments on the other side. So I think that's one of the misconceptions I can think of.
I think on a similar note, I'm kind of pulling from both Quentin and Abby's points that they just made, but I think on a similar note, something that I've learned in the few years that I've been doing lobbying now is everybody does need a lobbyist, and being a lobbyist actually does have a lot of influence. I also thought that it was just for like the big people like Facebook and Apple. Like I thought that they were just the people that have lobbyists, but even if you break it down to like a smaller scale, like Abby said, she represents like smaller, like community-based organizations. I represent a few statewide associations, a couple of nationwide organizations, but also some small folks too. And I think like being on the inside, I've really gotten to see that if their voice was not in that committee hearing or in that budget hearing, their voice wouldn't have been heard, period. And so I think that this is gonna come out wrong, but like the power that lobbyists have in terms of being able to be in the room and speak up on behalf of their clients, it's a lot. And it's not just for people that, you know, that have like 100,000 employees. Like it's also for the small businesses, and it's also for the green businesses, and it's also for the people that are focusing on immigrant rights. Like it's not just for the big people is what I'm trying to say. It's also for the small fish too, and the medium-sized fish, and the in-between-sized fish.
Yeah, I just want to reiterate what Alchemy said. I 1000% agree that everyone deserves and should have a lobbyist, and I think a misconception that I just want to reiterate is that sometimes people and groups feel like their voices don't matter, and so the only thing that I want to add is that it does, and that's how you have your voice heard, is by advocating and having either your presence here at the Capitol in those conversations, or having someone do it for you, like a lobbyist. So, you know, your voice does matter, and our elected officials are to represent us, and so, you know, we have a great opportunity in this country and in this state to partake in the democratic process, and I would just reiterate that, you know, it does matter, and if you have the time, you should take the time to advocate for whatever you're passionate about or whatever's impacting your community.
So, Since like all of your answers very much focused on being able to give voices to issues, and lobbying does have this misconception of it being a very exclusive for larger corporations. But how would you measure success within your field? And also, how would you deal with failure, since lobbying is not always successful? So how do you manage both the highs and the lows, and how do you measure that?
Okay, I guess I can go first on that one. So one of the clients that the firm that I work for represents is the California Transit Association, and if you're at all tied into public transit right now, it's not doing great. Since COVID, it's just been a steady decline because people are scared to ride transit, or maybe they don't feel safe. And so last year, public transit was on the chopping block in the budget. We were going to get little to no funding, which is detrimental, especially for people in the Bay Area where it's very public transit focused. And something that we were able to secure for our client, and I can take credit as a support lobbyist here, really my supervisor was the one who did the bulk of the work, and he's amazing. But what we were able to do was secure $5.1 billion in the budget for public transit operations and capital projects. And that isn't necessarily the number that we were going for, but it was very close, and it's still success. And I think that even if it's, you're not able to secure everything that you're looking for, having even just a little bit, because we are in a horrible deficit right now. So even just being able to secure just a little bit is monumentally helpful. On a smaller scale, just thinking of my smaller clients, for example, one of them is the California Green Business Network. They weren't able to make it into the budget last year, but this year we're able to secure a lot of meetings with legislators and still making that ask to try and get some kind of funding in the budget. Even if we don't get any money in the budget this year, something that I think is still considered a win is being able to get a seat at the table and being able to make new connections with people that can possibly help us next year. Or just getting in the queue for next year when hopefully, fingers crossed, there's a better budget situation. But also in terms of handling failures, I think for me it felt like at least last year not getting allocation in the budget for that client felt like a failure. But I think something that's important to remember, like as a lobbyist, is, like I said, it was a really, really bad budget year last year. It's still a bad budget year this year. It's not looking great at all. But I think it helps to remember that, it's not just my client that didn't get funding. There were a lot of extremely important services and organizations in the state that didn't get funding. And it's not personal, and it's got nothing to do with me as a lobbyist, but it has everything to do with the fact that there just isn't enough money to go around for everybody. So I think really putting things in perspective and maybe removing yourself from the issue that you're sort of tackling and maybe not taking it personally, that's something that's really helpful.
So for me, a success would be getting a bill passed, but it also depends on your clients and your clients' needs. So if they just have a budget ask, getting that budget ask in could or could not be a success. But managing a failure for me would probably, and our bill did die, right? So we, coping with that was interesting. I wanted to walk along the river and cry, but you just have to dust yourself off, and you just got to keep going, because good things take a time to come to fruition. And so you have your 1-year bills, you have 2-year bills, you have short-term asks, you have long-term asks. And so really lobbying you can have very quick turnarounds, you can have fast successes, but a lot of the times it is a multi-year conversation, and it does take day-to-day efforts. So successes, for me it would be getting a bill signed by the governor, and failure, it just depends on how I'm feeling that day, but typically you just keep pushing and you never give up. So that's what I would say.
Yeah, totally agree. So I think the easiest metric for success is bills passing, budget funding coming through. I do think some of the most impactful things I've worked on have been multi-year campaigns, and that means that in the first few years it did either the bill died, it was vetoed by the governor, or just wasn't included in the budget. And so I think just keeping in mind that some of the biggest dreams and policy ideas we have do take a long time. Some campaigns take a decade or more. So I think just keeping that long-term vision is really helpful. And then I think there are other metrics for success too, like on some of the issues that I work on, it's not even stuff that happens in the Capitol space, but behind the scenes. So like coalition building, getting the right organizations together, education. Sometimes, like for example, one of the clients that I represent is the Culturally Responsive Domestic Violence Network, and it's 20 different DV service providers across the state, but they all serve specific constituencies, so like the Asian Women's Shelter, for example. And one of the issues that we've been working on for years and years is prevention funding, because the vast majority of domestic violence funding goes to domestic violence response. So shelters, you know, things that happen after harm occurs, and we've been trying to get funding to prevent harm. It's really hard to get funding for that because you can't measure how much is prevented. And so over the last few years, we haven't been able to get our requests in the budget, but we're starting to hear more and more legislators talking about prevention. And even that is a really small victory, because the first year that we were advocating for it, no one understood what prevention was, no one could conceptualize anything past, you know, maybe teen dating classes, things like that. So education, capacity building, coalition building, I think are all super important too.
Thank you for a lot of those answers. I feel like, as all of you said, success is, especially in lobbying, when you're dealing with like small victories over a longer period of time. One of the things that I wanted to ask that relates to that is, how do you stay informed and research and advocate for the clients that you have, and are there any skills that would be able to translate to students that want to stay informed about issues that they care about? Like, what overlap is there between the work that you perform on a regular basis and things that people not in the position that you have would be able to do?
So I'm gonna use this to kind of promote myself for a second. I hope you guys don't think I'm being selfish, but I use something called Leggy Act, which after lobbying, I created it with a co-founder of mine. I identified barriers to representation, and being informed is one of those barriers, right? Time, you know, the amount of resources you have, the technology that you have access to, those are different barriers to representation. And so I use leggyact.com, and that's something that we've built out, but also I would suggest that you go to basic bill tracking software, right? So you can use LegInfo to, you know, follow the bills. You can have a free account, doesn't cost money. It's just a government database, and basically it'll notify you every time, you know, any of your bills are moving through the committee process, or they've been voted on, or, you know, whatever the update is, they'll notify you via email. There's a bunch of other different ones that, you know, you could subscribe to, that you could pay a monthly fee to. So definitely get started on some sort of bill tracking software. And then there's also news sites like you could go to PPIC, which I think is Public Policy Institute of California. You go to Cal Matters. You can go to California Globe, just to kind of stay in on the like media side of things, you know, on the politics side of things. And with that being said, there are 4 Ps to basically, you know, the state legislature and government, and it's policy, politics, press, and then the people. Okay, so I had to look over here because I almost forgot, but if you could get 2 of those, you might be able to, you know, win. You might get your ask through. If you can get 3, it's pretty much golden, and then 4, yeah, it's green light. So just remember the 4 Ps. Definitely bill tracking, and then try to stay up on the news. And I would also suggest developing a relationship with, you know, someone who's sitting in a legislator's office. So it could be a leg director, it could be chief of staff, it could be a leg aide, it could even be a scheduler. So maybe when you guys are done, go to the swing space, go meet some people, get some contacts, you know. Yeah, so just develop relationships, and then those other 2 things that I mentioned.
Yeah, I am subscribed to a lot of newsletters, and it is tough on the inbox, but I think just having like all the local news sources, all the kind of capital space, different articles that circulate, and then as well as there's individual people who have email listservs, so like the speaker's budget director has an email listserv, and he'll send out budget updates, and it's totally public, like anyone can join it, it's just a matter of knowing that it exists. So I'm signed up to a lot of email things, but I think at the end of the day, for better or for worse, what really makes a good lobbyist and why people pay for a lobbyist is because we have relationships. It's because we know people who work in the building, we know the elected officials. So a big part of the job, which I think sometimes is tough for me because it can feel transactional, and you have to kind of find a way to like build a genuine relationship with people. But you do need to know them. So lots of coffee chats. There are a lot of receptions and things that happen in the Capitol space. It's pretty typical for lobbyists to be at fundraisers, receptions, spaces where elected officials are. Do not underestimate the staff. I think staff are really the people who get things done, and so I've actually noticed that. I think we can maybe speak to being younger lobbyists as well. Sometimes there's this air of only the elected official matters, and like I have worked with more senior lobbyists who are very dismissive of staff, and they will, only really value if they can get time with the member. And I'm like, well, maybe you went to college with this member 30 years ago and you have that connection, but like he has no idea what's going on with this bill. The person who really knows and who's going to make the recommendation on the bill is the staff. And me as a recent college grad, I think Alchemy and I had similar trajectories of going college, fellowships, and then into lobbying, which is less typical. Typically people work in the building a long time or do other things before lobbying. I'm like, okay, well, you know that member from 40 years ago, I had a drink with the staff yesterday, like we're friends, like we hang out on Fridays. So there is benefits to being young too. So I think, yeah, those relationships are huge, and hopefully they happen organically as well, and you can find ways to do that beyond just, typical networking.
Yeah, so I would second everything that they said, and also add, I think Quentin, you mentioned that you had a STEM degree. I also have a STEM degree. I graduated from UC Davis with a degree in biological sciences. And the first thing that a lot of people ask me when I tell them that is like, why are you in lobbying and how did you get here? Good question, fair question. But I think that something that really helps, like having a degree in that background, is that I'm naturally curious and I do a lot of research. And so, when you're trying to learn more information about a specific issue area, I cover a lot of different issue areas. Having that sort of like that curious mindset really, really helps for me, because I want to dig deeper and I want to ask the questions, and I want to meet with committee consultants and ask like, hey, what's your opinion on this? What do you think? Do you think this is going to pass? Is this going to die? Like, what are your thoughts? So I think that having that background is really helpful, but also adding on to something that Abby said about just the benefit of knowing the staff. Definitely agree with like the fact that the staff are the people who get things done. Those are the ones who are staffing the bills. Those are the ones who you're going to be talking to make amendments. Those are the ones who are going to be in committee with you and scheduling, when the talking points and like the floor, all of the nitty-gritty stuff. That's going to be the staff, and so making that connection with staff is very important. But I will also add that, as I don't know if anybody in here is an introvert. I am very much an introvert. I don't like being outside. And whenever I tell people that too, they're always like, how are you a lobbyist? And I'm like, you're asking a lot of questions here. But it can be hard for someone, and like Abby said, it can feel very transactional. And I think that taking those coffee meetings that you would be scheduling to make those connections with people and making it in a way that feels organic for you. And so something that I like to do is, when people are like, oh, like let's grab coffee, let's meet up. Like first of all, I have my coffee. I'm not going to buy another one. But I really like ice cream. Can we go get some ice cream instead? And it just feels a lot more natural and organic. It feels like a friendship. And so finding some ways to sort of get in there in ways that feel organic to you and don't make you feel like you're sacrificing yourself for the job, I think are very important.
So that's an excellent introduction to my final question. The two panelists on the end have the experience of not being political science majors. Was this a career that you always envisioned for yourself? What was your path into it? And is that typical for people in this profession?
No, not at all. I did not envision myself in this position. I wanted to be a marine science major. But my mom was like, don't do that, so I didn't. But I didn't know what I was going to do with a biological science major. I know that a lot of biological science majors end up doing some type of med school, and I was absolutely not interested in that. I actually had a friend who was a Senate fellow, and that he let me shadow him for a couple of hours, and I was like, wow, you look so important. Wow, you get to have meetings with lobbyists, that's so cool. You get to lobby, you get to have these conversations about things that are really interesting to you and really important for the state. I want to do that. And so that's how I ended up here. I did not see myself coming here at all, but I think that something that's been really helpful, like I mentioned earlier, is just me being in that research mindset. I do like to focus on like one issue at a time, and so that's how I think that's what made the difference for me between being in the building and being a lobbyist. When you're in the building, you're kind of a jack of all trades, and that stresses me out. But being a lobbyist, I get to do like a lot of one or two different things, and I feel like my talents are spent really well there. So no, I definitely did not see this coming, but I love it.
Real quick, one follow-up question to that. What advice would you give to students that might find this occupation interesting, especially since y'all come from backgrounds that aren't inherently politically related?
So one piece of advice would be talk to me, but also talk to other people who are lobbyists. I mean, I got here also because I talked to other people who were lobbyists. And when I was in my fellowship, I spent a lot of time copying. It was draining, but I spent a lot of time copying people who were in a position that I wanted to be in. At the time, I thought I wanted to be a committee consultant, but I ended up going the lobbyist route, and I'm really, really glad that I did. But I wouldn't have known that that's something that I wanted to do if I wasn't having conversations with people. I think that we all have our very unique viewpoints of what the job is, but that's not really something, like, what we're saying the day in the life may be like, may not be what a day in the life for you may be like, specifically because we're contract lobbyists, we're not in-house lobbyists, and so that experience is totally different. So I think in short, I would say just have those conversations with people that are in the positions that you want to be in, make the most of your time with those people, and continue to follow up on those connections, because those may be the exact connections that can help you get a job in the future as a lobbyist.
So I absolutely wanted to advocate at the state legislature, even though I was pursuing an environmental science background. My whole goal was to, help protect the environment and to advocate for that which does not have a voice. And so it kind of happened like it was an aha moment where I was in class, and my teacher, my professor at the time, his name was Vincent Latino, and he's at CSU Sacramento. And he was a lobbyist, and so he was like very, very well spoken, very well articulated, and I feel like he never had a lesson plan. He just kind of like talked to us and lecture about like his personal experiences and what it was to be a lobbyist for him, and all the different issue areas that he worked on. And through that class and through that relationship with him, it helped me understand that this is what I want to do. And so it wasn't a clear path, and it never is a clear path. Well, for me at least. For some of you, I hope it is. So as I mentioned, I was seeking an internship for my degree, and I actually could not get one. I couldn't get one. I applied to a lot, and I just could not get one for whatever reason. And then through that personal connection with that lawyer in town, I was able to land an internship there at the law office, which helped me get my foot in the door, because lobbying is, in my opinion, is very much a word-of-mouth game, and if you don't know somebody, then it's very hard to get into the industry. So to piggyback off of what Alchemy has said, coffee those people, right? Find a mentor. It's not corny to have a mentor. It's not, it's not weird or, whatever. Find someone that you want to be like, and ask them to coach you and ask them to guide you so that you can be in their footsteps, because they've done it already, right? They're where you want to be, and in order to get there, you might as well follow their footsteps. Why reinvent the wheel? So I would suggest that you get a mentor and seek an internship if you want to get into the Capitol. They're always hiring, and make as many relationships and network as much as possible.
So yes, I did study political science. My other major was Spanish, and then my minor was in women and gender studies. But I actually also did not plan for this career, partially because of what I mentioned earlier about thinking that lobbyists were only on one side of the political spectrum, and that it was kind of an insider, like dirty role. And so I thought about law school, I thought about a whole bunch of different things. And it was the relationship that changed it for me. While I was a fellow with the California Immigrant Policy Center, they had contracted a lobbyist from the firm I work at now, and so I got to see what he did in the day-to-day. And he had, as I was finishing up my fellowship, asked me, I was going into, at this point I was going into my last year of college, and he asked me, are you looking for a job, like a part-time job while you're in school? And at the time I was working like 3 campus jobs that weren't really connected to my career path, they were just on campus kind of roles. And I was like, I would love to quit my other jobs and just work one that like could actually lead to a career. And it was, I was able to do that. And even though I was in the Bay, come up to Sacramento part-time and do some things over the phone and that kind of stuff. But it really was just meeting the right person at the right time and finding someone who was values aligned. As far as advice, I totally agree with the advice already given. I think another one is that because as a lobbyist you are influencing and you are trying to advocate for something, it's very easy to get really invested in the work you do. And also in Sacramento, this capital space can be a bit of a bubble, and it's really easy to make it so that your entire world is the capital space and all of your friends are in the capital space, and all you talk about at happy hour and dinner is the bill and this member said this and this happened, and that can be really draining. And so one of the pieces of advice I also give and that I've kind of implemented for myself is to make sure you have community outside of the capital space. My roommate, for example, does not work in politics. I can rant about stuff without worrying about it going here or there, and also just like we can talk about other things. So definitely find community outside of your job, and that goes beyond being a lobbyist too.
Thank you for answering my questions, and I also very much appreciate the insights that you can provide students about getting into the field, and especially the advice about having outside capital connections. But if there are any students that have questions that you would love to ask of them, I'll start in the very back corner. If you want to come to the front, so that way it's easier. No, Michael, not you. Very back corner. Just come up here to the front where the mic's ended. And then since it's... Yeah, you got
That's
the
all
project.
good, I've got a good voice. Yeah, good morning. My name is Aaron David Prakash. I'm a student at St. Mary's College in Moraga, California. It's a pleasure to join everyone today, and I want to thank the panelists for joining us. So, many Californians don't pay attention to legislation until it's already in the headlines. So, here's a fun question for each of you. What's one specific, relatively obscure piece of legislation moving its way through the legislature right now that you really want to see signed into law?
I can answer that because I work on an issue area that's obscure and difficult to get people's attention on.
Sure.
I represent the Pesticide Action Network in Californians for Pesticide Reform, and they are in the nitty-gritty on pesticide issues. Not really a hot button issue. If anything, it is like the only people who really care about it are big farmers who like just don't want any pesticide reform, but they're coming at it from an environmental lens as well as the health impacts that pesticides have on farm workers. So we are running a bill this year about pesticide application near school sites, and there's a bunch of science behind it around pesticides causing really horrible things, cancer, acute poisoning to kids who are at school on the playground while pesticides are being applied, and it is mostly the children of farm workers because those are the communities most impacted, and it is just like one of those ones where it's like, when I humanize it like that, it sounds interesting, but when I'm like bringing in my clients who are like these scientists who are just going on and on about these long, obscure scientific names and all these like nitty-gritty pieces of pesticides, I'm like, no one knows what you're talking about, nobody cares. So that can be a hard one. But that one's improving. I feel like we've done a good job of making it like clear that there are real like environmental and human costs too. But that's something I'm working on that I'm trying to get people to care about.
Sounds good, thank you.
I hope I don't let you down, sir. So I'm going to refer to a bill, I think it was like 6 years ago. It's AB 24 in 2017. And so that bill was specifically about the state seal of civic engagement. And so it's creating an opportunity for students to for students to qualify for a seal that would go on their diploma or their transcripts if they were able to demonstrate, quote unquote civic excellency through some sort of coursework or criteria that the Board of Education would then adopt for students to qualify for. So that one was one that I got really deep into a couple years ago as I was branching out and starting to work on other things, specifically civic education in California. And so that bill was like really weird and really out in the weeds. And it's also very confusing for application and implementation for school districts, because yes, you have this bill that was passed and signed by the governor and now it's law, and now we have this great opportunity for students, but the school districts have no idea what it is, and they have no idea how to implement it, and they have no idea how to support it. So right now, the state and school districts who want to improve civic education are in this limbo space where they either need to hire more people to support that, or they just need to figure it out. So yeah, that's the bill. AB 24, 2017.
Gotcha, thank you.
I think I'm gonna also do a subtle plug like Abby just did and pick a sponsored bill that I'm working on for the California Transit Association. It's AB 1904 by Assemblymember Ward. It seems a little obscure, but hear me out. So what this bill would do is it would allow transit agencies to place yield signs on the back of their buses, so that when they're merging back into traffic after stopping at a bus stop, it's safer, it's easier, and they can also speed up travel times. And I think this is something that's a little obscure because if you have a car, or if you've ever been a passenger in a car, I'm sure you've been behind a bus before, and I'm sure you haven't wanted to wait for them to get over before you get back into traffic. But as someone who is also on both sides of that, I've seen it, myself as a driver in Sacramento, but also someone who takes public transit and also someone who lobbies for public transit. It's actually very important because so many people don't want to let the bus back into traffic, and so it really does slow down. My gosh, I can't talk today. Bus travel times, for lack of a better term. And because it slows it down, it could also make public transit less appealing to people. And really the whole goal here is to advocate for public transit, make it look as popular as possible, make it accessible to as many people as possible. If your bus is always running late, you're not going to want to take it. And so I think this is something that could be, I don't know if obscure is the word, but it's definitely something that's a little out there and maybe unpopular with the average driver, but it's something that's very important.
Sounds good, thank you.
Thank you for the question as well. Were there any other students that had questions?
Wait, quick, before you leave, so I just wanted to reflect the question back to you, and if you could elucidate a bill that we should be focusing on from your perspective, what would that be?
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of issues at local government, and, I understand the intricacies, and, not everything is at the state level and everything. I'm not exactly sure how we would go about it, but some sort of government reform to make it easier for the state government to really step in and take some of the responsibilities in local government, because a lot of these city councils and whatnot have really dropped the ball on homelessness, on crime, on a number of other issues that affect everyday Californians. Yeah.
Thank you for the follow-up question. Great question. Any feedback or comments on that one?
As someone who works at Shaw Yoder Entry, Schmelzer, and Lang, we represent, I believe, 24 out of 25 counties in California. 24 or 25 counties in California. So I think that that's something that could be workshopped. I can tell you now they probably wouldn't like that idea very much, because local government likes to maintain local government control. The idea of the state taking over that control for them is not something that's very popular, but I think that if it's wordsmithed correctly, if you work with the proper coalition, you've got support on your side, the people that are really going to help build that case, I think it's something that could happen.
For sure.
Yeah, I mean, if you're really passionate about it, I would say get your thoughts down on a piece of paper and start having meetings. Start meeting with some folks and trying to figure out, if it's viable, right? Because if they don't want it, then it's not going to move. So you need county buy-in, you need local government buy-in as you're, thinking about that.
For sure. All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Thank you again for the question, and again, thank you for that amazing follow-up question. Were there any other students that had a question that y'all want to answer? Yeah, Michael, you want to come up and ask your question?
My question is just real quick. You said for the public transit, you guys, for the budget of 5.1 billion,
That's correct.
and then the two type of lobbyists was in-house lobbyists, and the other one was
Contract.
contract. All right, that's all I have.
Thank you.
Yeah, I'm gonna go with the student right here in the front left corner.
Do I need to sign up and go to the middle?
Yes, please. So that way people all around the room can hear you, so make sure to project your voice out.
Certainly.
This is where. Alright, that's fine. Very happy to be here. Thank you so much for being present today. My question for you is.
Name, school.
Sorry.
Your name, school.
Oh right. My name is Wang. I'm from Fulton College. Major political science as well. I'm very interested in potentially working as a lobbyist. And so my questions for you is. Being a lobbyist, how would you balance between working for bigger clients with more potential gains as compared to like smaller, more grassroots or organic clients with less financial benefits or like less potential reputations in it? How would you balance kind of between working for those two?
Just to project the question out to the audience, the question was, as a lobbyist, how would you balance working for larger clients where there's the possibility for more financial gain or like support as opposed to smaller organizations?
And since we're having people come up, if people want to line up, that'll just make the questions faster.
Perfect.
If you've got a question, line up.
That's a really, really good question. So with the firm that I work for, we offer, oh my goodness. Yeah. We offer association management services as well as lobbying services, which means that if we're lobbying for your organization, we'll also take over, managing your website. We'll do your social media. We will, work on your finances, your budget. So we'll do everything for you, and those are the clients that are usually the bigger clients that pay more. We also do have the smaller grassroots clients, and that don't pay as much. We don't do association management services for them. I think the important thing is and especially with the ones that I'm speaking about right now, they're not the same issue area. So they don't have, it's not like I'm pitting apples against apples, it's apples and oranges here. They do pay different amounts, but also what we're remembering here is that they are paying us to lobby for them regardless, and by default, that makes their issue important to us. So it doesn't matter how much you're going to pay us. If you want to pay more, that's great, but regardless of what your issue is, you hired me, I'm going to lobby for you the way that you're expecting me to, and every issue is going to get equal importance to me. That's how I treat it, anyway.
Could you just ask the question one more time, please?
No worries. Okay, so how would you balance between working for like bigger clients with more potential financial gains or like moving up, I suppose, as compared to like smaller, more organics, grassroots organizations with less of those benefits? How would you balance that?
So I think it depends on your role within the lobbying firm. So, if you're like a director or a manager or, depending on your position. But it's really about maintaining and managing your relationships. So obviously if you have one client, two clients, it's very personal. You can have a great relationship with those two clients as yourself, right? But then as you scale up and you have 25 clients, 25 counties, which is crazy. So if you guys need an internship, I would definitely talk to her. 25 counties is, half the state, right? So I would say as you're scaling up, you need to figure out how to effectively manage those relationships still so that your clients are happy, they're getting what they need. It's just a matter of, having the systems and procedures in place in order for you to be able to effectively render the service that they're paying for, because they may want a bill passed, right? So, how are you going to do that? If you have 50 clients that all want bills passed, you're going to have to hire people, you're going to have people under those people, you're going to have interns, it becomes a large, very large operation as you scale up. And so it depends on your role within the organization, but it boils down to relationships, managing relationships, and keeping and wowing your customers and wowing your clients, making them want to come back. So the question is, how do you manage that relationship or those relationships as you get more and more clients and as you get more and more revenue and possibly more and more expenses.
Thank you.
So just have one person answer to get more students.
Great, thank you so much.
Hi, my name is Samara Williams. I'm from St. Mary's College and I'm a political science major. So my question kind of goes with what you guys talked about in the beginning, just like having a bill birthed and like fed. But what do you guys do what's your relationship with reviving a bill? Like if you want something to come back.
So in our instance, we had a lot of opposition with the California Department of Public Health because they're the ones who administer the program, the California Newborn Screening Program. And it died because of the fiscal impact. They marked it as having like a $6.4 million cost associated with implementing the bill, and so I guess the budget, it was in suspense file, right? So there was no, I don't know, okay, but it died in that committee on the suspense file. So bringing the bill back to life would require us as an organization to basically look at what was working with our opposition, because our opposition was also the California Hospital Association, which is a huge organization, very powerful. And so we were meeting with them regularly towards the end to come to an agreement, to negotiate on what is good about the bill for everybody and what is not good, and cut out what's not good. And sometimes, that sucks because you can have a hostile amendment and then your bill ends up becoming something that you do not want it to become. So those are things to look out for. But to rerun the bill, you would have to meet with the people that were opposing it and figure out, what is the best way for us to pass this bill along so that it has value and that it's viable and that it's, appropriate. I hope that answers your question.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Susie Edelman and I'm from Fullerton College. Thank you guys for being here. I have a question. I don't know if you kind of answered it, but is there any ongoing advocacy efforts you have engaged in that is taking a little bit longer? And also, if so, what makes you confident that it's not so much a thing if, but when it's the right time for that bill?
I have an answer for you. So, like I mentioned earlier with the California Green Business Green Business Network, they had funding in the budget, and they've had funding in the budget for years. They've always, had a specific member request that's put in. Members can request certain funds that's, it affects their district in the budget. And so that was something that my client had previously gotten. Just because the budget got really bad, they weren't able to get that funding in the budget. And so I think that because there is that correlation of the budget being really bad and us not getting funding in the budget, I think that it leaves room for some confidence in the future, because knowing that this is something that's important to the legislature, so much so that they funded it, I think 7 years at least that I can remember, as a whole. It's been funded in the past, it's been something that's important. They've talked about making it a line item in the budget, which means that it would just get funding every year instead of it'd be ongoing funding instead of one-time funding that's allocated just once and you have to keep asking for it, which is what we're currently doing. But I think the confidence sort of comes from, and this kind of does go back to something that my colleagues here have said, which is having those connections and having those conversations in the meantime. While it didn't get in the budget last year, we're still having those conversations. We didn't give up hope. We're really hoping for the best here, and we're trying to make those connections with people in the legislature, with members that may be interested in hearing it for us. Even if they can't do it this year, it's on their radar for future years.
Okay, great, thank
I
you.
hope that answered your question.
Yeah.
Hi, my name is River. I'm a political science student at USC. I'm a junior, and my question for you is, I think Alchemy may have touched on this briefly, but I'm wondering how you deal with having a client whose objectives and interests are really different from your own, like, morals or values.
Okay. I think same. I don't know that I've necessarily had a client that I've just been like, I cannot do this. Like this, I don't believe in this. When I interviewed with the firm that I'm at now, I looked at their client list and made sure that that their ideals matched with my values. So I don't know that I've necessarily had that particular opinion for a client as a whole, but I have had clients that come up with a very obscure idea that I'm like, this is not going to get through the legislature, what are you thinking? And so when that happens, we do sit down and have those really difficult conversations of like, everyone's going to hate this, let's talk about how we can fix this, let's have those conversations with people that are going to be in opposition, people that aren't so enthusiastic about the bill, and let's figure out how we can make this work, because I think that's really what a lot of bill drafting is compromise between support and opposition. And so I think that's the closest I can get. I love all of my clients and what they do.
River, I would just suggest you never do that. Personally, if it comes down to it, don't do that.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Lynn Damon. Thank you for speaking with us today. I'm at USC dual degree MSW MSG. And at my current organization, we had a bill that died last year and we're introducing new legislation. But how do you navigate still accomplishing client goals and keeping up client morale, even when you're dealing with like a previously failed bill?
Yeah, that's a really good question, and that is something that I've been dealing with a client who has just their issue area is chronically underfunded, and it often is a target for budget cuts because they don't have as much power and influence as other folks in their space. It's the Association for Adult Day Services. So they provide day services for Californians who are at this intersection of being low income, elderly, and disabled. So it's a very vulnerable and important population, but they are fighting for the same Medi-Cal dollars that the really big associations are fighting for. And so every year they're on the chopping block. Every year sometimes there's cuts. Their Medi-Cal reimbursement rates haven't been raised since 2009, so they're just like, centers are closing. It's a really sad situation, especially for such an important population. And so I am dealing with that right now. I'm like, how do we keep morale up? And what we ended up doing this year, at least, which I guess we'll see how it hits with the members and see if it makes sense. But we are pursuing both a small we're calling it a fix-it bill, which is no cost, and so we think it's really likely to pass. And it's not going to transform the industry. It's not going to save all the closing centers, but it's something that when I say members in this case, I mean the members of the association. So the folks who are running these adult day service centers. It's something, and it's just something that will save them a bit of money and also prevent some future harms. And we're running that bill because we know it's going to pass, and then we're also advocating for the rate increase, which we don't think is going to happen because this budget year was really bad, because it hasn't been increased since 2009. It's going to be a multi-year push to get that asked. So we're trying to balance both, like how can we show folks on the ground that there is some progress within what's politically feasible, and also give hope for the future that like we get that there's bigger fish to fry, and that like we need to be pushing on this at the same time. So that's something I've done, is just kind of given a short and long term goals.
Thank you so much.
Hi, my name is Leah Wizibo. I'm a sophomore at the University of Southern California, and I'm studying political science, and I have a two-part question.
It's not
Oh, I was like, why is it down there? My first question is, being contractual lobbyists, do you feel like there's any competitive benefit of doing that over working in-house?
You only get one question, because there's a lot of people.
Oh wait, my second question is better. Can I ask that?
Sure.
Okay. So a lot of you guys spoke about the more like mystique, dark reputation of like larger corporate lobbying for like Facebook or whoever. Do you guys feel like there are any pull factors to joining those industries, and do you believe that you can enact ethical and societally positive change while working in those industries, or is it kind of just automatically you're just selling out to corporate greed?
I'm gonna take one for the team, I guess. This in no way reflects my firm that I work for. This is my personal opinion. I don't know, honestly. I think that it depends on what your values are, I guess. Like if you believe in what Facebook and Twitter or whoever you're referring to, the big corps, if you support what they do, then sure, yeah, I think if your values align, it's great, it's beautiful. But I think this kind of goes back to the answer that Quentin gave earlier, which is, if you can avoid it, don't do it. They probably will pay you a lot more because they have a lot of money, which kind of goes back to another question somebody else asked. They do have a lot of money, and so there is a pull there. There is the pull of connections, making connections. Maybe let's say that you decide that you want to work for big oil. There's a lot of connection. Okay, cool. I'm seeing okay. So yeah, I'm sure there's a lot of connections in big oil if that's what you're into. But if you're someone like me or someone like Quentin who's like, yeah, that's a no for me, then don't do it. It's not worth it. It would feel like selling out, frankly, to me personally.
Okay, thank you.
Hi, my name is Aiden Fisher. I'm from Fullerton College, and thank you guys for being here for your time. Quentin, this one's for you. I'm sorry about your bellman. Hopefully, but I guess what would you learn from that, like going forward, lessons that you learned, stuff like that?
Okay, that's a great question. Kind of tough. So, I think what I learned from it is that you need to engage opposition as early as possible. Now, sometimes your opposition is not responsive. Sometimes it could be a government agency, and your emails, your phone calls are just left in a phone bank somewhere, never to be heard, never to be seen, right? I don't know if that's how it works, but that's how it feels. And so, I would just recommend engaging with your opposition as early as possible. And sometimes that's their strategy is, hey, we're gonna wait until your bill is, almost to the floor, or, it's in a hot, trendy committee, and then we're gonna oppose it. And, it kind of messes up your strategy and your game. So you just have to be aware of who are the stakeholders and engaging with them as early as possible. I think that's what I learned from that.
Thank you.
And then also, just to answer the 2 questions ago, the young lady that asked the question about a client morale, I would also suggest that you don't focus, and I'm kind of split on what I'm about to say, but don't focus on just one thing, because there are other bills that might be related to your client's needs and their desires that you can be focusing on. You could be supporting. You could be, working with people of the sponsors. You could be working with the sponsors, building the coalition. So, just because your bill is dead doesn't mean that you stop working. So, there's always something else to do. Thank you for the question.
Hello, my name is Angel Aguilar. I'm from Fullerton College. My question is, do you think the concept of lobbyists and lobbying has benefited more people or large companies? In the state of California, at least. Under?
Could you repeat the first part again?
Do you think the concept of lobbying has benefited people more or large corporations here in California?
Large corporations, generally, right? Like, that's who the institution was built to benefit, is those who have resources. Even, folks like me who work in a firm that is social impact, it's so much less resourced, right, than big corporations. And so, lobbyists, they can do some pro bono work, but at the end of the day, every lobbyist is getting paid. And so, just like any other industry, the folks who have the most time that they can put into it, they have the most staff, all of those things are going to be the ones who have the most funding. But that being said, that's just the reason to continue to grow, in all the other sides of things. It's not a reason to give up. And I think it, comes to what we started with saying, which is everybody deserves a voice. And so, unfortunately, if this is the way that it's been built, and having your voice heard means having a lobbyist who can represent you in the capital space, then that's the way to do it. And maybe there are other ways to change the system to have reforms at the same time, but for now, this is a way that elected officials and people who make decisions about all of California get to hear voices. So I think, yeah, that's at least my perspective.
Yeah.
I'm gonna make my answer super, super, super quick. With all the respect in the world, I disagree. I think, and maybe this is just the industry that I work in. I do like alternative proteins, so like Beyond Meat and stuff like that, and public transit. I think that the benefit is deeply, deeply benefited and affected by the lobbying that we do. I think that it's a trickle-down effect, right? Like, I think that we are lobbying for the industry or the client that we're lobbying for, and if that industry or client has a direct connection with the public, which they typically do, those positive benefits that they're seeing will likely be trickled down to the consumer. And so just for like an example, we're trying to make public transit affordable. The association that I lobby for will be deeply benefited by that because public transit will keep going. They'll have services to provide. And the public will also be benefited because public transit's going to be affordable, it's going to be accessible, it's going to be something that you can really rely on, it's going to be something that's on time. And so I think that the public can absolutely benefit from the lobbying services that we do.
Thank you.
Just for shits and giggles here, I'm gonna put a tiebreaker in there, so I'm gonna vote for large corporations are benefiting more. So the perspective, real quick, that I take is that when you look at the average American, they work 9 to 5, and then most of them have kids, and then most of them have to cook, and then most of them, are doing so many things, right? So that person is not going to be informed. They're not going to have the time to engage with the legislature. They don't have a lobbyist. If you don't have a lobbyist, you're not represented, okay? That's my perspective, and people may disagree with that, but if you're not in here every day, if you're not making phone calls, you're not sending emails, you're not meeting with people, and you don't have those resources to do those things, you're not going to be represented because they don't know who you are. They probably don't know who any of you are unless you have meetings with them, unless you're in their office. So that's your civic duty, is to go and do that, and no one's going to do that for you. No one's going to do that for you. So.
Very tiny thing. This is not part of the debate at all. I just realized part of what I said was a little abstract. So I thought of a concrete example. One of the groups that I represent in a bunch of issue areas are farm workers, and that's a population I have in mind when I'm saying the system isn't built to benefit them. One, because most of the ones, at least who I'm working with, are not from right close by here. So they have to travel, and they have to take off the entire day if they want to be a part of a Capitol lobby day, or if they want to testify at a hearing. And the Capitol currently, which I hope changes soon, doesn't offer translation. So what I've had before, which I feel mixed about, is I've had 20, 30, 40 farm workers travel up, take a day off of work, have to find childcare, all of these things, to sit in a hearing room with me to testify on a bill, which when I say testify, I just need to give their position. So they're gonna go up and say their name, and I support or I oppose this bill. They don't get any more time than that. If they try to say any more, they get cut off. But there's no translation services. So they sit in the hearing for 2, 3, 4 hours. They don't understand anything that's happening unless we, as the organizations which are under-resourced, the nonprofits I represent, pay for the headsets and do live translation. None of the elected officials do, these folks don't have the translation. And so I think that's like a really concrete example of where the system isn't currently built to benefit those types of people, but there could be changes. Like if there was stipends given for people who travel, or translation services in hearings, then I think it could serve better and better. But right now I don't think that, for example, serves the people.
Thank you.
Yeah, and just real quick, sorry. To piggyback again off of what Abigail said, translation. Sometimes I've seen in committees our Spanish legislators translating and speaking in Spanish with the public, and to me that was a really awesome moment, and I really appreciated that. So sometimes you will see, people speak in their native language to communicate effectively between the public.
Hi, I'm Ruby. I'm with the University of San Francisco. I'm a politics major. So it sounds like all of you have had experience lobbying and things that you're not just passionate about, but personally relating to. So I'm kind of wondering, like, how do you keep coming at not hot button issues with full force rather than pulling your punches because you know that it's not something that the public is generally interested in, or legislators at the time, but generally things that are not really in public discourse or don't have a lot of momentum behind them. So when it becomes discouraging, and not just discouraging, but also you become desensitized to that rejection, how do you keep coming at it with full force as if maybe the next time is when it's going to come through, or do you come at it with a different strategy?
Could you just rephrase the question in like one sentence or two
Sure.
sentences, please?
Yeah.
It was great. I just need to frame it in my mind.
So with issues that don't have a lot of momentum behind them in the current political moment, how do you come at them with full force, or do you come at them with a different strategy when you're very discouraged?
I think that is a business decision. Personally, I would say don't pull your punches on anything. Never, 100% on everything that you're doing, because if you're giving less then what is the purpose of doing it in the first place? So, it boils down to whether or not you can afford to pull your punches or not. For me, then yeah.
Hi there, my name's Linda Camacho. So I have realized that during your tiny little debate that you had between the two of you, you work with a lot of corporations and counties in the States. So I was wondering, with the amount of contract lobbying that you do between many different people, how do you manage having certain bills that they present to you from very different places? Neither of them are necessarily morally, ethically wrong in any way, but they contradict within each other. So can you elaborate on how would you work on that necessarily?
Yeah, so typically when we sign an RFP, or we sign a contract with a client, there will typically be a clause in the contract that says whether the firm has any, there's a word that I'm looking for. Thank you, yes, conflicts of interest within the firm. So we'll make that note up front. If that's something that comes up later though, what we'll typically do is we'll hand it off to somebody else that's in the firm. So perfect example is we represent the Humane Society of United States, and we also represent Food Solutions Action. Food Solutions Action doesn't necessarily represent these companies, but it as a whole represents the industry of alternative protein. So like I mentioned earlier, like Beyond Meat, Califia Farms, and Humane Society, I think we maybe all know what the Humane Society is, but if not, it's like animal stuff. And there was a conflict of interest between the two. They were both looking for funding from the same pot, and I had to step off of the Humane Society and give it to my colleague so that I wasn't lobbying. I wasn't trying to sort of, pit them against each other as one lobbyist. We'll, split them up as necessary.
With all of those questions, I think that was a lot of really great questions. Definitely sparked debate on this side of the table. Any last advice or things that you all want to impart to the students in attendance here before? Because I think, yeah, taking a break after this. But yeah, any last comments that y'all wanna share? Or did y'all leave it out on the table earlier?
The last thing I would say is follow your dreams, guys and girls. Just follow your dreams. What makes you happy or what you're passionate about. You have to chase those so you can have a good life, in my opinion. So, just make sure that you give everything you've got. You're gonna knock on some closed doors, and they're not gonna open, and you're gonna knock on some closed doors, and they are gonna open, and so just keep your head up. It's not easy, it might get confusing, you might fail, but you have to dust yourself off, you have to keep going, and just never give up, guys.